So as one of the classes in Ashes of Creation, you can choose the tank. And let's cover all of the abilities that are currently active up to date that you can use on said tank. Keep in mind this is all open to change, and I'll be covering ones that were there for Alpha 1 and ones that will be coming with Alpha 2. You'll be playing the traditional role of absorbing as much damage as you can along with holding the threat of the enemies. So first of all, we have an ability called Tremoring Bellow. It basically lets out a shout and then you stomp the ground. However, you will use this ability to create combos with your other powers since it applies stagger and also trips them if they have the snared condition. Then you have your shield assault ability. You'll be able to lunge forward, dealing damage and applying the shaken condition. Now you can combine this with Tremoring Bellow. Use your shield assault to snare them and then to trip them with the bellow. And you can use it up close and personal with the enemies. You'll only get lunged up to the enemy and that is it. Then you have a grapple ability. You can pull an enemy towards you. Now this will also cause a snare effect, which means you can follow up with your bellow to trip them over and knock them down. Then we have a simple damaging threat ability, Inciting Strikes. You deal damage in a cone in front of you, causing added threat with that damage. Then you have a simple damage resistance ability called Grit. Basically, when you're not within this stance, you will gain stacks of courage. Then you can use this stance and you will gain a buff of damage resistance, then also unfortunately reduce your movement speed, but also increase your outgoing damage. And you'll gain additional damage resistance based on how many courage stacks you have. Yeah, the slowdown effect, not a fan, but I guess that plays into the whole role of tank not being as mobile as, let's say, some other characters. And you gain the extra benefits by doing so. Luckily, it's a toggle ability, basically no cooldown, so you can enter the stance whenever. Then you have an ability called Aegis. Basically, dispel all negative effects and create a protection dome, a cone behind you that will transfer 50% of the damage that any of your allies take that are behind that cone to you instead, along with giving them some control resistance. This will be a very useful ability to help protect your allies. Basically, if the enemy's going to do area of effect damage or they're not targeting you, you can position yourself and protect your allies by absorbing up to half the damage they normally would have taken. And other than that, you can always just use it as an oh shit cleanse button when you get put under some nasty bleeds or status conditions. Additionally, you do have an active block ability. This allows you to absorb up to a certain amount of damage on your shield rather than taking the damage from your hit points. I personally really like this ability as I'm used to this from a game called Neverwinter. I would also like them to make sure that the shield stance going into the active block is something that you can do immediately. Whereas if you had to restrain from doing any animations to wait till the opportune moment to block, you end up with much more stale combat of not doing anything because you're afraid of committing to an animation and then not being able to block that big hit. So that is ultimately the entire kit for tank as we know it for Alpha 2. However, when you level up, you will undoubtedly unlock more abilities, and especially when you choose your archetype to augment with your primary archetype class, you shall gain some even more abilities and change some of your current powers. However, keep in mind with Alpha 1, there was some other abilities that you didn't see just there. For example, this weapon toss, bulwark, ultimate defense can give you up to like even invulnerability, Myrmidon a 3-hit combo, onslaught a charge ability, this may have been changed to shield assault, shockwave, and your resounding smash. Again, those are Alpha 1 abilities. Do not know if they're going to carry over for the other iterations of the game moving forward. So far as we know, tank threat will work based on a threat list. Whoever has dealt the most damage or the most effective damage, as is the case with the tank, will have the aggro of the enemies. The enemies will attack them. We have seen an ability called Hatred that would force the enemy to target you for 5 seconds. Again, it is one of those abilities that we don't know is going to Alpha 2, but I certainly hope so, as if a tank dies, they need something to put them back on top of the threat list. So that is it. Thanks for watching and consider subscribing.